So welcome to the first ever First Congregational Church of East Longmeadow annual meeting via Zoom. We're glad to have as many of you that are able to join us on this first virtual experience. I hope that everybody is doing as well as you can under these circumstances, and it really is nice to have so many familiar and joyful and welcoming faces. We hope that we'll get to see as many of you as possible at our outdoor service coming up in 2 weeks on July 26th. So we will be outside. We will be practicing as safe a service as we can, and we'll be keeping folks updated on what is, how we continue to proceed under these conditions. I will just explain a little bit about actually, Katie is going to share the PowerPoint so that we can get started.
And you want me to go ahead and share that now?
Let me just say a little bit about the Q&A, and then actually we'll share it. So what we'll do for the Q&A is, if you're comfortable staying on mute or Katie mutes you, that will cut down on any background noise. When we have the opportunity for questions, or if you want to ask a question, feel free to kind of raise your hand in the video if that works for you. If you've used Zoom before and used the chat feature, you're welcome to do that. Use that feature as well. And Marge, who is our clerk, will keep an eye out, and then she will call on people as she sees hands raised, and then you can take yourself off of mute to ask your question, and then we will converse from there. For those on the phone, you don't have the ability to raise your hand. So if you, at some point, Marge will ask if there's any questions from folks on the phone, and then you can speak up at that point. So I hope that's all helpful to start, and then we will start the slideshow, and you can kind of hopefully follow along both in with voice and screen if that works. So thank you for doing that, Katie.
Are you ready?
Sure.
All right. Oops, I gotta move that, sorry. There we go.
So as you're familiar with our purpose for our congregational meeting, so thanks for coming. It's very important that as a congregation, we really are able to keep everybody as informed as possible about our kind of collective governance responsibilities. That's what kind of makes our family so distinctive and important, is that we're all involved and all have voice in our leadership. And we'd like everybody to be as involved as they can. That helps to sustain our future. And people's input and ideas is critical to making sure that we are staying current and forward thinking. And that's what we're all about. So we encourage questions as we get a little bit later. We'll highlight things and try to keep things moving. So what we'd like to start with before we get to our warrant is opening with a prayer from Reverend Bale.
Muting myself. I'm glad to see so many of you here, and it's good to gather, even if we cannot touch one another. We touch one another with our hearts. Let's be in prayer. Holy God, we give you thanks. We give you thanks for having made us as we are and as we may be. We give thanks that we are made in your image. We are grateful that we have the ability to be with one another without having to be in the same space, at least at this point in time. You have given us this great challenge in these days, and we ask that you give us the strength and the commitment and the feeling of family that goes past our loneliness, so that we might think of ourselves as your church, your collective church, your people going forward into the future. We are here together this day to review the year past. It is part of what our legal bylaws ask of us, and so it's important to stay committed to those bylaws while we are still a body. We ask that you help us to think of new ways and different paths and ongoing possibilities as we strive to be your church in this strange new land in which we find ourselves. Keep us kind, keep us patient, keep us charitable. All those fruits of the Spirit that you have given to us have not gone into hiding, but can be very much in evidence among us. And we ask that you help us to call forth our very best selves, both for this meeting and for the days and weeks that are to come. We give thanks for our leadership who have worked so hard to bring this together. And we give thanks for you and your presence with us. In your holy name we pray. Amen.
Amen.
Thank you, Carrie. Now we'll go to the warrants slide so that our clerk, Marge Atwater, can share with you our plan for today.
Warrant, the First Congregational Church, United Church of Christ, East Longmeadow, Massachusetts. You are hereby directed to notify the members of the First Congregational Church of East Longmeadow, Massachusetts, who are qualified to vote via Zoom meeting at 9:30 on Sunday, the 12th of July, 2020, to act on the following articles. Article 1, to hear and act upon the reports of the officers, boards, committees, and other organizations of the church for the preceding 12 months. Article 2, to elect officers, boards, and committees for the upcoming church year. Article 3, to transact any business that may properly come before the meeting. And you are hereby requested to distribute an attested copy of the warrant via online posting and email distribution at least 7 days before the time of said meeting. Given under my hand this 23rd day of June 2020, Gail Holt, moderator of the First Congregational Church. Attest, I have this 23rd day of June 2020 distributed an attested copy of this warrant via online posting and email distribution. Marjorie Atwater, Clerk of the First Congregational Church.
Thank you very much, Marge. Now we will continue to review the board reports. So I'll ask Katie to just kind of highlights from our past year. I hope everybody's been able to look at the annual report. There's a lot of work that went into it. We are fortunate to have a wonderful church secretary in Cindy Koziel, who just does a fabulous effort putting it together. So our congregation stands this year at about 350 members. We were very fortunate to welcome back Reverend Carrie Bale this past January during our year. We have been blessed with a financial surplus that to enter 2020. So, you know, we've definitely had a lot of ups and downs in our financial picture, and you know, we're very thankful to Jerry and the business and finance team for leading us through this. So, I think that having some good things come out of 2019 was definitely helpful to basically just provide some pause in sort of what has been the downward trajectory that we've have experienced. So it certainly does not turn that picture entirely, and there are many things that we still need to focus on for 2020. But there were, as we talked about in the financial meeting, there were some reasons, both in people's contributions as well as our expenses, that enabled us to kind of have this momentary good fortune. And who knew that it would come in so handy kind of as we headed into 2020. None of us could have foreseen a pandemic, and I think that it has been quite an unusual occurrence. But I think what is most striking is our response in the face of the pandemic, that through the leadership and the volunteerism and the commitment and the love of this congregation, we have been able to move our worship and our fellowship online in very swift order. So we went from sort of a Wednesday decision that it appeared that gathering together was not going to be in our best interest, to having an online representation of a service that following Sunday. And so we've been able to maintain that online presence with a lot of creativity and a lot of patience. Nothing is easy, and technology has both been our friend and our foe, I think, through this time. But we appreciate people's patience in things that didn't go so well, and continuing to come back and celebrate with us when we have better days. We saw the retirement of Ray Drury in April. We are fortunate that Marcia Jackson, as our organist, continues to provide us with her, really heartfelt and affirming music, and we're going to try to incorporate that into our, whatever our service is, for as long as we possibly can. We're also graced to have other musical talents among our congregation, and so we're fortunate to have guest pianist in Katie, and others that we hope you'll hear throughout our attempt to get online. So thank you. Cindy Humphreys has also volunteered to help us, so we hope to incorporate that music well. We do still have a lot of challenges. We need to be thinking about the succession of our leadership. You may notice as you look through the annual report and the nominations that there are a lot of, mostly all, 1-year terms of people. People were very generous with their commitment in this year of uncertainty, kind of in this shifting this year, to continue in their roles so that we could maintain some continuity for our congregation. But we hope that we can add to our leadership and maybe shift things around in different ways so that people can benefit from new ideas, new styles, and new leadership. We also hope to continue more now than ever, our focus on stewardship and people's ability to continue to support the church in our ability to reach out and be present in people's lives, and how we do that, as well as having on an online presence. That has not historically been something that we have focused on in the recent past, but obviously the current challenges have pushed us in that direction, and we're still trying to figure out how exactly do we maintain an online presence. We've sort of been moving through just getting through the next weeks and the next months, but now's the time that we really kind of need to think about what is that next phase, and how do we not only return to some physical celebration of our worship, but how do we continue to maintain the church and the connection for folks that are either that are just unable to be with us physically. Because what we are hearing is that it's been helpful for all of us to have that connection, have God's word, have that uplifting message and spirit in whatever way we are ready to take it in. So the other thing is that what was characteristic of this year, as we welcomed Carrie with us in 2020, was to kind of start that designated term pastor role and kind of think about what our goals are. So just to kind of give Carrie an opportunity to recap what our goals are, and you'll hear more. So this is not intended to be a super long report, but I'll invite Carrie to say what words she'd like to about the designated term pastor, and then I'll fill in after.
Okay, thank you, Gail. Well, I was looking forward to the goals of this designated term pastor, because the other times I've done transitional ministry, it's always been focused on an interim, finding the right pastor, and so forth. This time, that's not the challenge. The challenge is to come up with, as it says, a well-articulated mission and focus for the congregation. And figuring out what comes next for you. Do you continue as a solo congregation? Do you find ways of connecting with other congregations in order to improve financial and other resources? The worst case scenario, but one which we should always mention, is that what happens if financial resources run out and the church needs to make a more major decision about what to do with itself. So I was beginning to think of ways that we would have discussions and talk about people's preferences and look at what our current missions are and what we would like them to be, when we landed in the midst of the pandemic, which made group discussions and group thinking sessions at least difficult, if not impossible. I mean, I think going forth, if we continue to not have a number of meetings, we'll have to figure out how to do that online. But so what am I doing? As I said in my report, I think the hardest part is not being able to be there for people for whom I would like to be there. So for example, people who are very sick, people who are dying, people who are isolated in their homes. But given the realities of the pandemic, that's not a possible way of spending time. So I have done my best to stay in touch with people and to invite all of you to stay in touch with the people who are not represented here today because of lack of technology or isolation or whatever other reason. So I think staying in touch and communication will be especially important in this time. But then there are all the questions of, what are the questions now? In other words, I think things are changing for all churches. And so I have been trying to stay in touch with online conversations from our denomination and from other places that are talking about what all of this means for the church. And frankly, so far, no one knows. I mean, it's very hard to peer into the future of what will be. We can take courage from the fact that it actually has many hopeful aspects in terms of sort of dragging us kicking and screaming into a more technological future that enables us to connect with people maybe who are even further away in ways that they might have ideas or examples for us that would be helpful, or even contributions. I have one of my good buddies from seminary is in Canada, and she's been watching us weekly, and she was just saying, okay, well, I'm going to send my contribution if I can figure out how to get the bank to transfer the money to the US from Canada. So those kinds of expansions we can't even foresee. So one other thing besides trying to watch all these different webinars and things that people are putting up, is I have asked the conference if there could be a group of designated pastors. There are groups that gather with interim pastors, and that's a good thing and one thing, but it's not quite the same thing as the concerns of the designated pastors. And so I'm hoping that we can at least gather a conversation of people around that topic. Secondly, and lastly, I'm trying to turn our focus toward that by using the meme of be the church to preach on through the summer, so we can think of what it means to be church. What are these pieces of being church that we are and want to be, and how can we be going forward? So I hope that will begin to turn people's focus a little towards what the future might look like for us. I think that's enough for now.
Thank you, Carrie. I think though that's really important, and I appreciate you know, all that you have had to jump into, but hopefully what this opportunity provides, because it has been such a life-changing and distinctive occurrence in our lifetimes, that I hope that it will be illuminating. And so I invite people, you know, really how does this moment resonate with you, and what are your ideas? So as we kind of you know, move forward, and go on to the next thing, you know, how can we share our technology? How can we mentor our children? How can we volunteer with our church? So, you know, what are you thinking about? How might you know, you help? And what are your thoughts? So I will, you know, before we kind of officially vote on the report and the nominations, what questions do you have? And I think what I might ask Katie to do is stop sharing the slides so that we have an opportunity to see each other. And Marge, if you have received anybody that you know wants to speak first, then we can do that. Marge, do you want to?
Well, I don't see anybody with their hand raised. If you do have a question, please raise your hand so we can acknowledge you.
Or an idea.
I have a black screen.
Does anybody have any?
Bill Yorns?
Yes, can you hear me?
Yep.
Yes.
I was just wondering about what's going to happen with the choir, and has anybody had any ideas of how to proceed with that once we do come back to the open church?
That's a good question, Bill, and it's not one that we have had a lot of discussion about. I think we are still looking for ideas and suggestions. We've gotten as far as talking about individuals who can contribute in a musical way to worship outdoors, and we're planning to do that at an appropriate distance so that, you know, that does not sacrifice. But in terms of an actual choir and voices, there's still concern about the health and safety of a choir. So we're still looking for thoughts on that. So we'll keep you informed. I will keep everybody obviously informed.
Yeah.
I think it's worth mentioning that someone is being interviewed for a continuing music person for the church, and that person has some experience and is gaining more experience in, for lack of what they actually call it, is figuring out how to do choral things online. And there are programs that can help each one of us to do our own piece of singing and then put them together and make a choir. And of course, that sounds very different than what we all know and love by singing together, but it may be at least one way that we can pursue that sooner rather than later.
Good. Thank you.
It's always Zoom bingo.
It's true. Tracy has been, gathering anybody who'd like to participate in bingo on Saturday evenings. So that's an opportunity for social activity and fun from the comfort of your own home. I think it lasts typically about an hour, and always welcoming new participants, new friends. Any other comments or suggestions or questions?
Forward.
Charlotte?
Charlotte's
Have counted the people in this meeting. Do we have I see Katie, but I don't see Kevin and Zach. Are they there to vote?
We have a quorum, I'm assuming.
Okay.
Thank you. We do.
And Zach's not of age just yet. Give him another year. He'll be there.
Oh, I thought he was a member.
No, not officially yet.
Okay.
All right. Well, if we don't have any additional questions right now, having received a motion from Olin Johnston to approve the report of the past year, is there any additional discussion needed on the report itself and all the wonderful, wonderful contributions that went into it? Great. Are there any votes against accepting the annual report? Are there any abstentions in accepting the annual report? Great. The annual report is approved. And likewise, having received a motion from Donna Shaw to approve the nominations of officers and boards and committees, is there any discussion that anybody would like to offer in terms of the nominations as presented?
The nominations.
Are there any votes against the proposed nominations? Are there any abstentions? Great. The nominations, the slate of nominations is approved. So thank you for that. So I thank everybody for their participation in our very first annual meeting. And I'm proud to say that we just did that in exactly 30 minutes. So we are right on schedule. I want to just thank so many, of our leadership. First, of course, Carrie Bale for leading us, for Katie Cruiser for being a technology partner and a willing children's message all along, to certainly the co-moderator and vice moderator in Karen, and being support with her, words and ideas as we go along, and all our board representation, having Marge as our clerk to keep us on track. Donna has something to say, so I'll let her.
And kudos to you, Gail, as others I'm sure want to echo, for the amazing job you've done of getting us into the technology and keeping us all on board. And the communication lines have been incredible with you and Carrie and other church leaders. But it's a great thing you've done for all of us. So thank you.
There's something more to be said on that Karen is prepared to say.
Okay, sorry, I didn't mean to steal your thunder.
No, that's fine, Donna, thank you. No, it's a good segue into just thinking about recognition for all the people that help out, all the people that have agreed to stay on the boards and committees, and to all the people that have served. But this morning, I would really like to single out Gail Holt as somebody who has really gone the extra mile and been there for us during these past years. She has been with us through 3 different ministers, has helped us to work through all the challenges that has presented. And her work behind the scenes is unparalleled. Gail is an amazing communicator. She obviously showed us all that this morning and leading the meeting. She, I'm sure, gets emails by the dozens. I can imagine that there is not a day that goes by that she doesn't get a church-related email that she has to read and respond to. She does a lot of the writing. She wrote all the words for the annual report. When the newsletter was being out, she did all the work for the newsletter. And with this new challenges that we're presented with being online, just so everybody knows that we would not be having our church presented to us via Zoom if it weren't for Gail. Every Saturday at 11 o'clock or 10 o'clock, I forget the time, she meets with the people who are doing the Zoom, and then when everybody is finished with their piece, she then has to coordinate everything and make it presentable with graphics and present it to you for your viewing for the next day. So we really appreciate her technology, her leadership, her guidance, her love, her caring, going the extra mile. She really has gone above and beyond. And I would just like to say we would all like to recognize you and thank you, Gail. We do have a gift certificate for you to have dinner with your family at Posto. And just wanted to say thank you again for all that you do. We love you.
Well, that's
Here.
You can unmute in order to clap if you like.
Love you.
I really
Love
appreciate
you so much.
thank you. I appreciate the sentiment, but I really, what is so important to me is that we get to do this all together. Every single person that's part of this Zoom, I know, has contributed, whether it's today, whether it was yesterday. I don't do this alone, and that's why I do it, because I don't do it alone. I love the teamwork that this church does together. I love that the people who are good at gardening make our church look nice, because that's not a skill that I have. So I like to contribute where I can, and right now that happens to be with technology, but there are others who spend many hours writing and sharing words that I can't. So just thank you to everybody who's pitched in, because we all have done it, and I hope that we will all continue to do it together, because that's what makes our family really, really great. So I hope that we'll see as many people as possible on Sunday, July 26th. And right now, I certainly invite you to check out the service on YouTube if you haven't already. And then maybe you'll join in fellowship after, or Zoom next Saturday, or wherever you can fit the church family in. So with that, the meeting is adjourned.